Hey there, Jeff Manchester here with iZotope. Now, referencing or using references in a mixing or mastering context is the process of trying to make what you're working on sound as close to something that already exists out there. It could be that a client has asked you to make their song sound more like someone else's in vibe, tone, or loudness, or maybe all the above. Or perhaps you're mixing your own work and your favorite band or artist is your sonic North Star. Whatever the case, this video will be your guide to the ins and outs of referencing. We'll cover mistakes you want to avoid, as well as practical tools and tips that you can use to get as close to your reference as possible. Now, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit that bell icon. This way you'll be notified when new videos go up. And just a warning, this video is extensive, so buckle up for the ride or just use the chapter markers below so you can skip around to a section that you're especially interested in. Now, without further ado, let's jump in. Yeah, so there is no perfect match. I don't want to bum you out, but it's important to understand as you begin your referencing work that expecting to sound exactly like the track that you're referencing is practically impossible. Now, there are some aspects of a reference that you can come very close to, like level, otherwise known as loudness. But in terms of trying to copy vibe or tone, it's never really going to be exactly like the thing that you're referencing. And this is because people make all kinds of choices when they're cutting a record. Choices about instruments, gear, processing, even performance choices that can be impossible to quantify and then replicate in your own work. Even if you were to look up the gear list of your favorite band or artist, then go study the work of the mixing and mastering engineers that carry that track out to the mass market, it still probably wouldn't line up in the same way that you expected. In fact, mixing and mastering isn't the only place where referencing something else becomes problematic. Another great example in the audio world is the ADR process, which stands for Automated or Additional Dialogue Replacement. This happens all the time in film and television, especially in your favorite movies and TV shows. ADR occurs when an actor has to perform their lines again after the shooting is wrapped because something spoiled the original audio on the day their lines were recorded, or maybe the take was just really bad. Anyway, if you're a good audio engineer in charge of the ADR looping process, you want to make sure that you get the same actor in the same location or as close to the one used during the original production, wearing the same clothing and using the same microphone that's placed at the same distance away from the actor. You're essentially recreating the original production circumstances. And this is done so that the audience can't tell that the line was re-recorded in the first place. Now, the trouble is, even if you recreate everything perfectly, it's really hard to fool people. Even audiences unfamiliar with the ADR process will know that something weird is happening in that line that just came out. In fact, just search bad ADR into YouTube and you'll see some examples of what I mean. Anyway, the larger point here is that it's important to adjust your expectations and try not to fixate on sounding identical to your references. Now, don't worry, there's still ways to get close to certain aspects of a mix or master, and we'll be covering those in just a moment. You need to understand exactly what you're trying to reference. I'll be splitting this tip into two separate streams, one for those mixing for a client and then another for those mixing their own work. Now, if you're working for a client and they send you a reference track, pick up the phone or write them an email and ask them specifically what it is about the reference they want you to impart onto the mix. It could just be the snare sound or something interesting about the chorus, or maybe they like how the low end sits across the whole song. Whatever the case may be, it's important to understand why that track was chosen and meet the expectations of the client, because After all, something in the reference track was meaningful and exciting enough to them that they shared it with you. Once you have a better understanding of what's being asked of you, take the time to really listen to the reference and be realistic about what you're being asked to impart. It could be that what the client is asking for is sonically unachievable or achievable at the expense of something else that's already established in the mix. Give the client context for the moves you want to make and what implications they'll have for their track. Now, similarly, if you're mixing for yourself, you have to really understand what it is about the reference that you love. Put the song on, have it loop, and take some notes. Observe what you hear about the track. How does it make you feel? What elements of it get your body moving and head bobbing? Keep those vibes in mind when it comes time to get to work and see if you can recreate whatever it was that made you fall in love with the original reference in the first place. Now, it's not always the case, but sometimes the client will send you a rough mix of the song that you're tasked to mix. The rough mix is usually a quick and dirty attempt to give you, the mixer, a sense of where they want the song to end up sonically in the end. It's critical not just to listen to this mix a lot, but also to have a conversation with the client about what makes this mix special. I know of some mix engineers who choose to ignore the rough mix and go down their own road until they create something that's truly unique, and then check that against the client's rough mix when the time is right. Now, this avenue is completely okay, but only if the client knows that the rough mix may or may not be followed by you. If you're lucky enough to get a rough mix, load it into a track slot in your digital audio workstation alongside the multitrack, and refer to it often as you travel in the direction of a polished, professional mix. If you know which song you want to use as a reference, it's important to locate the version of it that exists in the highest fidelity possible. If you're trying to get your hands on a physical copy, Red Book CD quality is ideal. Yes, you can still find physical copies of music, though it might take a little bit of work. If you're referencing from a streaming service, be sure to check that your streaming app is configured to play the audio back in its highest quality. Paying a visit to the settings menu is usually where you'll be able to make the changes to audio quality. So just make sure lossless or high-res lossless is checked. The reason that we do this is to make sure that we're working with a representation of the song that is as close to the version that was recorded acoustically. When you play music from a streaming service, the service will often default to suboptimal quality settings that plays back a lower quality version of your song. The streaming service does this so that less data is used to push the audio to your ears. In order to slim down the file size of a song, a compression algorithm discards small amounts of musical information that are contained in the original track. So you go from a lossless to a lossy audio quality. A lossy version of the song might be great for casual listening or exercise, but not for referencing work. You want to make sure you're dealing with a high quality, great sounding copy of the reference so that you can make the best decisions based on what you hear. Okay, so now that we've set the table for what a reference is, how to locate them, let's talk about practical ways to incorporate references into our mixing and mastering work. Audio Lens is a tool that iZotope makes that allows you to capture the loudness, dynamics, width, and tonal qualities of any audio file on your computer. So if you have a favorite streaming service you like to use, find the song there, and make sure to toggle the correct quality settings that I mentioned in the previous tip. Or if you have files from a CD that you ripped, play the media back on your computer and make sure to press the capture button in Audio Lens. So now Audio Lens is going to listen to the song with focus on dynamics and loudness, width, and tonal information. So now you have a snapshot of a full mix that you can use to reference against. You can also use Audio Lens to create profiles of individual instruments too, if you happen to find one that's isolated in a fully mixed song. Or if you happen to have samples of instruments with the sonic qualities that you like. Now, the process for capturing instruments is the same as capturing an entire fully mixed track. Just play the song back on the computer, press capture, and after a few seconds, press capture again, and now give the profile a name. So, once you have your targets in the AudioLens app, what do you do next? If you own Ozone, you can fire that up in your DAW and run the assistant using a target that you created in AudioLens. All you have to do is just locate the target by the name that you gave it. It should appear here. Now, the assistant will run and attempt to transfer loudness, tone, width, and dynamic properties of the reference onto the track that you are mastering. Now, if you're mixing, working with individual track references, just open up Neutron, head into the targets to find the solo instrument profiles that you just created. In both tools, Ozone and Neutron, you can use the controls in the assistant view to blend the reference sound over the source material that you're working on. If you're working in Neutron, adjust the tone slider to do this. And in Ozone, you can adjust the width, dynamics, and tone sliders to get a healthy blend of the reference. If you have a digital copy of the reference, it's always a good idea to bring it into iZotope RX so you can glean even more information about it. By simply dragging the file into the RX application window, you can see it represented in the spectrogram. You can view the waveform and see its frequency profile by toggling the little slider down here. So if I bring my slider all the way over to the waveform view, I can see the peaks of the waveform. Now, depending on the profile of the peaks, we can get a sense of how compressed or dynamic it is, roughly, at a glance. We can observe if clipping is occurring. We can see the overall dynamic arc from start to finish. And if we want even more information, especially about level, we can go even deeper. A tool you should know about is waveform statistics. So once you locate it here and click on it, the waveform statistics window gives you information about the waveform of your current selection. By selecting nothing, by the way, it assumes the entire file is selected. You can also hit Command or Control A to select everything too. Now let's take a look at a few key details. Integrated loudness. This displays the integrated loudness level, which is essentially an average level of the song from start to finish. While it's not always wise to mix or master your music to an integrated LUFS target, just having this information is helpful because it gives you a ballpark of where you might want to go and have your track land level-wise. LRA, or loudness range, displays the loudness range and reflects the dynamics of audio levels in your selection. Like I mentioned before, you shouldn't necessarily be aiming for a specific LRA reading, but dynamic genres like jazz and classical will usually have a larger number, like 8 or 9, while EDM or other modern music will have lower numbers, like 4 to 6. So, depending on your sonic goals, RX gives you lots of interesting data to help you make decisions about your track and its loudness. Another one for the folks who have a digital copy of the reference song. Another great tool to use is Insight. Insight is a metering suite which gives you mission control style metering possibilities. A tool I really like is the loudness history graph. As you play the reference song back, you'll spot a gain trace running from left to right. What Insight is doing is tracking the loudness journey of the song. The one I have loaded up right now, which I can't play out loud, but I'll tell you, is Perfect Illusion by Lady Gaga. Now focus your eyes over here. You'll see a big jump in loudness at that moment. That jump is when we go from the verse to the chorus. Now I'd encourage you to listen to the song on your own to get a better sense of what I mean at that moment. So right away, if someone sends you this mix, for example, as a reference, you're going to be made aware of jumps in level at the choruses, something your client might want to emulate if they've chosen that reference. Knowing that extra loudness is occurring in the choruses to help them pop can help you make decisions about the gain structure of your own mix. Now, Ozone is packed with referencing technology. We already referenced some, get it, in the audio lens section, but there's other stuff too, like how you can load a reference in this area and loop certain sections of the song in the referencing panel. Now, when tracks are initially loaded into the reference panel, handles are going to appear overlaid on the waveform display. The handles that we see represent the boundaries of predetermined loop points. The loop boundaries are placed on similar segments detected in the track. Now, by default, the segments are going to be named with a letter, A, B, C, D, E. Now, you can customize the loop points, you can rename them, and whenever you want, you can press the reference power button in the I/O panel to hear the reference track play back. So now you can flip between the original track and your reference in Ozone. Now, speaking of the I/O options pop-out menu here, the I/O meters contain metering options for reference tracks too. You can do stuff like replace input with reference. Now, when enabled, the Ozone input meter will display the reference track level. With the reference loaded, you can see the levels of the reference here and the source track, the one you're working on, here. You can make adjustments to the loudness of the reference using the gain tool here to match things up. But it's not just the reference level that can be seen in Ozone. When enabled, the reference track's spectrum will be displayed in the module spectrum meters alongside the spectrum meter of your current source track. Now, in a module like EQ, you can see how your spectrum stacks up against the reference as the two dance around. You can even slow down the spectrum movement in the options menu to really dial in your changes with precision. Now, I mentioned Ozone is packed with referencing features, so we're going to keep going. You also have an Ozone EQ match. This lets you match any reference track to an extreme degree with an EQ that uses 8,000 separate bands to get the most precise snapshot possible. To use this, just get a reference loaded in your digital audio workstation. Use the capture function to sample the EQ profile of that reference. Then, take an imprint of the profile of the song you're working on. Now, you can use the boundary controls here to set which part of the spectrum you want to match. Then, use the parameters over here to transfer the EQ profile of the reference track onto your source track to taste. Another means to capture and work against references is to use tonal balance control. With this tool, you can call up a number of references that we at iZotope have created using special tech that's analyzed thousands of great songs in many different genres. Or you can even upload your own or a whole folder of songs. Once you've settled on a target or uploaded your own, place tonal balance control on your master bus and keep it open as you make mixing or mastering moves. As long as your track in white is within the bounds of the target that you've chosen, here in blue, you're in the ballpark to match the dynamics and tone of your reference. You've got two views as well, broad and fine. Use the view that makes the most sense to you. You can actually control the parameters of Ozone and Neutron from the main window of tonal balance control. For example, as long as you have Ozone in your session, you can call up Ozone's EQ and remote control its nodes, all from tonal balance control, thanks to a protocol that we make called inter-plugin communication. So if you have trouble keeping your song, the white line, within the bounds of the target against the green-blue stuff, move the nodes around until the white line starts to conform to the contours of the target. And it's not just mastering, you can do the same thing at a track level with Neutron. Just find the instance of Neutron that's on a track that you want to alter EQ-wise from the drop-down menu and get to work. Another important meter in tonal balance control is the crest factor meter. If the circle moves too far to the left, there's a chance that your low end is too dynamic. If it moves too far to the right, your low end is likely too compressed. See if you can get the circle to land right in the middle, the sweet spot for a healthy crest factor. Now, the final tip. is just to trust your choices when referencing. As I mentioned in tip number 1, you're never going to reach a one-to-one match for the reasons that we covered earlier. So learn to be proud and confident and to trust your taste and trust that what you've made is good enough to live on the same playlist as your reference track, but also unique enough to stand out on its own. At the end of the day, the goal should be to create a tonally balanced, interesting mix or master that pleases the client and stands shoulder to shoulder with songs that you love on a playlist. Homogeny should never be the goal, especially in creative work like music production. So go make something new, exciting, that someone else will be moved to reference. Thank you so much for watching. For more information on mixing, mastering, why not check out our free educational series, Are You Listening? Right here on YouTube. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.